Hello and what up, B-Hutches? This is Caleb Jones and this is the Alpha Male 2.0 podcast. I am in Armenia still, and I am sitting here in my hotel room looking out over the streets, over the little buildings. Europe has little buildings. I'm used to big buildings. Europe has little cute little buildings. And that's if you consider Armenia Europe. It's part of the Caucasus, but that's a distinction we can discuss or debate another time. Today is a topic that I know well. It's something I have wrestled with for most of my adult life. On a semi-regular basis, I get questions from you guys about this. Certainly since I started doing YouTube videos a year or two ago and people could see me more clearly. People ask about my weight loss and how that's going and all that good shit. And I was gonna do a video about this, and I would actually have preferred to do this in video format, but I've gotta stay steady with the branding on the stupid YouTube channel. So this was just too off topic for the topics I now cover at the YouTube channel. So you're getting a podcast instead. Maybe I'll do a video on this on the alt tech sites like on Odyssey or BitChute. Maybe I'll end up doing that. That might be a good idea. But I don't know, I'll think about it. Anyway, what I'm about to explain to you is the number one thing that people don't understand about people who are fat and or people who are overweight. I make that distinction. There are fat people and there are overweight people, i.e. chubby people. I am a chubby person. I'm not a fat person. I've never been a fat person, but I've definitely been a chubby person, and I've definitely been more chubby than I am now. But regardless, both those categories of people fall into the overweight category, and there is something that most human beings don't understand about people who are overweight in the modern era. I'm not talking about people who were overweight hundreds of years ago. That was different. I'm talking about people who are overweight now, which is the majority of people in the United States, I believe also in Canada, certainly in Mexico, and it is now migrated to Europe. It's interesting that Europe 20 years ago used to be where all the skinny people were, and all the Europeans would make fun of all the fat Americans. Well, if you've been to Europe lately, you know it's not nearly as bad as the US in most cities, but you know people are starting to get fucking fat in Europe. You Europeans in 20 years will be just as fat as Americans. Watch. I can see the trend. You Europeans getting fatter and fatter and fatter every year. So it's a Western problem, although it is mostly an American problem that has been exported to other Western countries. Fat people, overweight people, people having trouble losing weight, and so on. And so once you get what I'm about to explain to you, which most people don't understand, even fitness experts don't understand this because it's not a fitness problem. It's a mental problem. Some do, to be fair. I have seen a tiny handful of fitness experts discuss this problem, but the vast majority of fitness experts and the vast majority of guys who give fitness advice to other guys on the internet have no idea this problem exists, and it kind of renders all their advice moot. So let me state it as simply as I can. In the Western world and in the modern era, I am not talking about people who are fat in Asia. I am not talking about people who are fat 100 years ago. I'm talking about Westerners, primarily Americans in the modern era, who are overweight, fall into two completely distinct categories. These two categories are very different. The reasons for these people being overweight is radically different from each other, and the way these people lose weight and what these people need to do to lose weight is radically different from the other type of person. They are two distinct types. They look the same, they act the same, but they are actually very, very different. So let's name the two types. What should we name them? Type 1 and type 2? No, that wouldn't work. Type A and type B? No, that wouldn't work either. Let's see, type P for psychological. Type P sounds dumb, no. Let's call them type S for psychological. Yes, I'm fudging how it's spelled. And let's call the other type L for lazy. All right, that works. Type S and type L. So if you see an overweight person, if you're talking to an overweight person, if you are an overweight person in the Western world right now, that person is either a type S or a type L. Very, very different types. Very different, and I will explain. It's very simple once you understand this. Type S people are overweight. Some of them have a psychological issue with food. Some of them have a psychological issue or issues with food and exercise. I am in this category. I have a psychological issue with food. I have issues, for real. I have issues with food. I do not have them with exercise. That's one of the reasons I'm not gigantic. I've talked about this many times. I have a sister who is right next to me in the birth order. We share the same genetics. She eats whatever she wants, and she is about 400 pounds. She is so overweight. She is so gigantic. She can't stand. She has to sit everywhere she goes. She can't just stand and talk to you. Her legs start to hurt. She can walk upstairs, but barely. She has to push on her knees. She has to get like this squat position and push on her knees in order to navigate stairs. And by the time she goes up a small flight of stairs, she's breathing heavily and she's having a hard time. And we share the same genetics. And if I ate literally whatever I wanted, I would look like her. And that's one of the motivating reasons why I don't look like that. So in her case and in my case and in millions and millions of other people's cases, the reason they are overweight is because they have psychological issues and they've always had them going all the way back to probably childhood. And I'm not a psychologist, so I can't give you details on where these things came from. From what I know, they are both from your personality and from your upbringing, both. It's a combination of both those things. But these are people who are overweight and have pretty much always been overweight their entire lives, or have at least been wrestling with their weight for their entire lives, starting back when they were, if not little kids, then puberty, 13, 14 years old. They have psychological problems that fight them when they try to lose weight. And I'll discuss more of that in a second. Okay, that's type S. The other type of fat person or overweight person is type L. And this is very different from type S. Matter of fact, they have very little in common with type S people. Type L people are people who have no psychological problems with food. Instead, type L people are people who used to be skinny, who used to look good at some point in their lives, and they just got lazy. That's what L stands for. They got lazy and they succumbed to the American psychological programming of eat all the food you want and get big and fat. So at some point in their lives, maybe when they were 18, maybe when they were 25, maybe when they were 35, it varies per type L person, they just got fucking lazy and they just got complacent and they slowly started getting fatter and fatter and fatter every year. And so 6 years later, 7 years later, 10 years later, now they're fat. And you will see a lot of red pill or pickup artist sites and YouTube videos of before and after pictures of these super hot, smoking hot young girls, and a picture taken 5 years later when they're just hugely obese and fat. I personally know a lot of people in this category, a lot of women in this category, and I tend to think that most people in this category are girls, are women, but I've seen a lot of men in this category too, men who are perfectly skinny their whole lives, and then one day they got married, or they just got complacent, or they got busy, quote, busy with work, and over a period of 4, 5, 6, 7 years, it doesn't happen instantly. It's not like a year later they're fat. That doesn't happen. It takes several years because they gain a little weight every year, and they wake up one day and they're fat. They're fat fucks. And that's why they were lazy. They don't have a psychological problem. They could lose the weight. Matter of fact, type L's, unlike type S's, are 6 months away from being skinny again. And that's a literal statement, and I'll give you specific real examples in a minute. A type L person, if they get the motivation to do so, and they usually don't, but if they have the motivation to lose the weight, they will lose the weight, and they can lose it pretty easily. I will give you an example. I've had this happen many times, at least 3 times. 3 times I've known 3 people in this category. So I have been trying to lose weight, and I have lost weight, but I've been wrestling with my weight in earnest since I was 39 years old. I am now 49. So it's been a 10-year fucking journey for me. And it was 39 when I stepped on the scale and I was really chubby. And I went, okay, I can't do this. I can't go to my 40s and 50s being a fat ass. I've got to take care of this problem. This is going to start affecting my health. It's going to start affecting my confidence. It's going to start affecting my woman life, maybe. It's going to start affecting my financial life. I can't be a fat fuck. And so I lost some weight, and I've been wrestling with that back and forth for 10 years. I still have a good, 35 pounds to lose at least. And I'm a big guy. Now, fortunately for me, and I just got lucky here, I have a very broad, stocky build. You're like, fortunately, yeah, the good thing about being broad and stocky is that you can gain a lot of body fat and you still look okay. And I know this because I've talked to women, many women I've had sex with. And so they've obviously been up close and personal with me naked. So they know my body pretty well. And I will tell them back before I lost the weight, I would tell them how much I weighed, 250 pounds or close to it. And they go, what? You weigh 250 pounds? You weigh 240 pounds? You don't look it at all. I mean, you're definitely chubby. You're a chubby fucker. Yeah, that's true. But you don't look that big. Right, because my body is good at spreading out the body fat. But anyway, where was I going with that? Anyway, I have been battling this problem for 10 years, and I have still not succeeded. I have improved, but I have not succeeded. And after 10 years. Now, I have personally known 3 different people who are type Ls, because I'm a type S. They're type Ls. And these are people I personally know. These are not random people I saw on the internet. These are people I know well, I personally know. I'll give you my favorite example. A guy who owned the house that I used to rent many, many years ago, before I switched houses and moved in with Pink Firefly. This is a few years back now. He was a type L. He was the chubby fuck. Chubby fat fuck. And he was probably 2, 3, 4 years older than me, a little older than me. Fat fuck. And one day, I only saw him like once a year, or maybe once every 6 months. One day he shows up. I hadn't seen him for 6, 7, 8 months, and he's skinny. He's not like, oh, he's lost a little weight, or he's lost weight. Oh, he looks good. No, he's fucking skinny. And I stared at him. I went, what the fuck? What the fuck happened to you? He's like, yeah, I lost 70 pounds. I'm like, what? I just saw you 6 months ago. You lost 70 pounds in 6 months? He goes, no, I actually lost it in 4 months. Was it 3 months or 4 months? Something like that. No, he was like, he was real nonchalant about it. He's like, no, actually it took me about 3.5 months. And I did what all type S people ask type L people when they lose weight, which is the wrong question to ask. This is a dynamic I didn't understand back then. I said, holy shit, I have been trying to lose weight for 6, 7 years. And I haven't lost anywhere near 70 pounds. What did you do? Which is the problem. This is what people focus on, what to do. So I said, what did you do? Which was the wrong question to ask, but I didn't know that then. And he literally said, this is what he said, and this is what happens when these type L people lose weight. Now, to be fair, to be honest, let me rewind it for a second. Most fat, overweight type L people never lose the weight. Most people who get lazy and gain a bunch of weight are fat the rest of their lives because they just don't have the motivation to get off their asses and lose weight because they're lazy. They're lazy fucks. So they have to really get motivated to lose the weight. But once they get really motivated, they lose it, and they lose it in a few months, and they're fine. And that's exactly what this guy did. He said his answer was, I just stopped eating cheeseburgers and I stopped drinking beer. And I went, my head was spinning like, what the fuck? It can't be that simple. It can't be that easy. I said, I don't even drink beer. I don't drink alcohol. And I don't eat burgers. I do keto and I count my calories and all this intermittent fasting. And I rattle off all this shit I was doing that was kind of working, but not really. And I said, yeah, that's bullshit, dude. You did something else. He was like, no, that's literally all I did. I would have a cheeseburger for lunch and fries, cheeseburger for dinner or something like that. And I drink a lot of beer at home. And I just stopped doing that. And I just started eating salads. That's it. And I lost 70 pounds in like 3.5 months. And he left my house. He's a good guy, friend of mine. He left and I'm sitting there just bewildered. Like, what the fuck? Why was it so easy for him and it's so difficult for me? What in the hell? And there are 2 more people, another guy and a woman, who had the same deal. They were type L people. And by the way, that was his deal. He used to be skinny. I saw old pictures of him. He was skinny his whole life. He got married, had kids, started getting lazy, started gaining weight, and over a period of 10 years got fat. And the reason he lost the weight is his wife started losing weight. His wife actually got a 6-pack. So he's sitting there with, his wife has a 6-pack and he's got this big fat gut hanging over his belly. And so that was enough motivation for him to say, oh shit, I better lose the weight that I gained. And he just lost it. And to this day, he has not gained back a single pound. I was emailing him last year and he sent me a picture. I said, how's your weight going? Send me a picture. He's still skinny. This was years and years ago. And that's what happens to type Ls when they get the motivation to lose weight, and they usually don't. Again, I want to repeat, type L fat people, overweight people, are usually fat the rest of their lives because they don't see the point of busting their ass for 6 months and dieting, and they're like, well, I don't want to do that. I have dated many women as FBs, MLTRs, who were really hot and skinny when they were 18, 19, 20, 21, and today they're 28, 29, 30, and they're huge. They're not only gained weight, they're fat. And I promise you, these women are going to be fat the rest of their lives. They're just not going to get the motivation to lose the weight. They're just not. So I'm not saying type L is some good thing to be. It's not. Being a type L is bad. Being a type S is bad. Being overweight and being fat is a bad thing, period. Now, why was he able to lose weight when I was having so much trouble? Because he didn't have any psychological issues with food. That's the answer. That is it. That is the answer. Now, does that mean that a type S person like me can use that as an excuse? No. If you're a type S person, you could still lose the weight. It's just harder to do that than if you're a type L person. I'm a type S person, and I could, within a year from now, look like Captain America. I could do it. I have no excuses. So it can't be an excuse, but it is a factor. And so if I say one of the reasons I'm overweight, or one of the reasons it's more difficult for me to lose weight, is because I have psychological issues with food, if you then turn around and say, oh, Caleb's making excuses, incorrect. My weight is 100% my fault. I've written entire articles called Everything in Your Life is Your Fault. It is 100% my fault. I could look like Captain America a year from now. I could. I really could do it. I have that ability. It would just be very hard, but I could do it. I could absolutely do it, so I have no excuses. But it is a factor. I have seen, and I have people in my own family who eat shitty food, and they're still skinny because they're type L people who haven't gained the weight yet. They haven't gotten lazy yet. Now, maybe later in life they might. And if they do, I have seen people who are type Ls who lost the weight just with a snap of their fingers. They just fucking lost the weight 6 months and they were fine. Now, are there exceptions to everything I'm saying? Of course. Whenever you talk about human beings, there are exceptions to every rule. You can find type S's who got motivated and lost all the weight within 6 months. My favorite example of that is Penn Jillette. Penn Jillette lost 100 pounds. I think it took him 6 months. I read his whole book about it. Really interesting. And he was definitely a type S person like me, but he was and the reason he was motivated is his doctor said, you're going to die. You're going to fucking die. And he had some kind of horrible surgery in 6 months. And so he didn't want to die because he has little kids. He waited later in life to have kids, which is smart. And so he's like, I can't die for my kids. And so he had a lot of motivation. So yes, you can still overcome these I am not saying that type S people can't lose weight. Of course they can. I've lost a lot of weight, a lot. And I've really improved on my psychology. So I'm not saying I can't. I'm saying it's a factor, but it is still my fault. It is not an excuse, but it is a factor. And to say it's not a factor is denying the facts. I mean, we could do a whole thing about genetics too. I'm not even going to go there, but I can give you an example really quick. I have one of 6 siblings. And so I have 3 brothers, and all 3 of my brothers are tall, skinny guys, all 3 of them. Now, one of these tall, skinny guys is like me. He has to work really, really, really hard to stay skinny. I mean, he has to work really hard. He works very hard, and he has, and good for him. He's been skinny most of his life because he works really hard. Now, he's done some horrible things to his body to stay skinny. I'm not going to go into details, but he's done things. But my point is he had to work really hard. But I have 2 other brothers who have been skinny their whole lives, and I've talked about this before. They eat shit all the time. They eat all the bad food that I eat, and maybe not quite to the degree I eat it, but they eat bad. They eat pizza and tacos and burritos and all kinds of shit and big mounds of pasta, and they don't gain weight. They just don't fucking gain weight. They have different metabolisms than I've got. So genetics also is a factor, but it is not fault. It's not an excuse. It's still my fault. Okay, enough of that. So, where do the problems arise? Here's where the problems occur. And you see this happen on the internet every fucking day. Number one, you have these type S people who look at the type L people who have lost weight, and they try to duplicate what they did, and it doesn't work, and they're confused. And they say, well, something must be wrong with me, which actually is true. There is something wrong with you if you're a type S. There is definitely something wrong with me psychologically with food. I know that unquestionably now. And I've kind of pinpointed what those things are, and I've worked on them, and I've improved a lot. I'm not 100% yet, and to be frank, I may never be 100% with this. I have emotionally accepted that I will probably never have a 6-pack. I'll probably look good, but I'll probably never have a 6-pack, certainly now that I'm about to turn 50. If you want a 6-pack and you're over 50, you're basically starving. You're starving every day. Or you're spending 2 to 3 hours a day exercising. And I don't have that kind of time, at least not now in my life. Maybe later in my life I will, but right now I just don't have that kind of time. My lifestyle wouldn't allow for spending 2 or 3 or 4 hours a day exercising. Because I have buddies who've lost weight, and they still eat all the shitty food, but they blow their fucking brains out. Tuberal, my old friend from the pickup artist world, he did this. He got 6-pack abs, and he goes, Caleb, it's really easy. All you do is you burn like 1,500 calories every morning, which means you run for like 2 hours. And he would do this. He would run like a maniac for 2 hours, and then he could eat all the food he wanted to. Ricky Gervais, if you want a celebrity example, he did this. He lost a bunch of weight a few years ago, and all he did was he just would jack the fuck out of his exercise, and he'd exercise for like 2-3 hours a day. Great if you can do it. I can't do that. My lifestyle won't allow it. Problem number one is when type S people look at the type L people and they're thoroughly confused, as I was for many years. They don't understand how this guy who is just as fat as them can snap his fingers and lose all the weight in 6 months and leave it off. They don't get it. What they don't know is that guy was skinny most of his life, and he only became fat in the last 4 or 5 years. Whereas you, the type S person, you've been chubby and or overweight off and on your entire fucking life, haven't you? And so that means likely you have some psychological issues going on with food that he didn't have. And for a type L person to lose weight, it's just a decision. It's a hard decision to make. It's just a decision. I'm motivated enough, I've got to lose this weight. And they go, okay, and they just lose weight. And it's a very technically simple process for them. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, the bigger problem, is that you have all these skinny guys on the internet, or fit guys on the internet, or type L, formerly overweight type L guys on the internet, giving weight loss advice and fitness advice to fat type S people. And they give them and I've mentioned this before in articles in my old blogs, they give them all the wrong advice because they're telling them what to do. Hey, what you need to do, man, is carnivore diet. Caleb, you just need to do the carnivore diet, bro. Caleb, have you tried intermittent fasting? Hey, man, you just need to do sprints. It's not just me, it's everybody's overweight. Hey, have you tried this? Have you tried well, you should just go vegan, bro. You should just, it's all this how-to advice. And I've heard the craziest fucking advice you've ever seen. You need to fast. You need to just do fasting, like the snake diet. You can do saltwater fasting. And by the way, all these things are good. I've done all these things, except the carnivore diet. I've done a lot of research on it. But I've done most of these things. The problem wasn't how to, the problem is in my head. The problem is psychological. And I've mentioned this before on articles where I started using an app called Noom, N-O-O-M. And I recommended it cost like $9 a month or something. I recommended it if you were a type S person. If you're a type L person, it won't help you nearly as much. But if you're a type S person, you have a psychological problem with food or exercises in some cases, the Noom app will help you dig into your brain and fix or at least address the psychological problems you had. And so when I really made real headway for the first time in my entire life, and I've lived a long time, I'm almost 50. So just in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been able to kind of arrest this, is to address the psychological aspect of why I was overweight and why, when I did all the things that I was told to do, count your calories, exercise, lift weights, TRT, intermittent fasting, blah-blah, blah-blah, blah. I've done a lot of stuff, and I agree with all these things. These are all good things to do, but they didn't work, or they worked to a degree. I'd lose 20 pounds and then stop losing weight because I had a psychological problem with food, and I still do. And so the problem is, as I said earlier in this podcast, no one understands the distinction between these two people. They don't understand this. So fit people or people who lost a lot of weight who are usually type Ls will give advice to overweight people who are type S's, and they'll give them all the tactical advice that won't work. What they should say is, hey man, you have some kind of psychological problem with food. And so I could tell you to go on the carnivore diet and or lift weights or do intermittent fasting or whatever the fuck, count your calories or do ketogenic diet or do the Mediterranean diet, all this other bullshit, okay? I could tell you to do that. The problem is you wouldn't stick with it, or you do it half-assed, or you do it for a while then stop, because your brain is operating against you. You need to dig into your brain and figure out why your brain is against you and why your brain wants you to eat food, which is what you have when you have these psychological issues. I can't speak for other people who have psychological issues with food, but I can speak to mine. There's a big, strong part of my brain that says, I'm an alpha male 2.0. I teach long-term consistent happiness. I teach unlimited freedom. Therefore, I should have the freedom to eat whatever the fuck I want. And so for me to say, no, I can't have that Cinnabon is anti-alpha male 2.0. Now, that thought is wrong. Everything I just said is wrong, so don't copy what I said. That thought is wrong. Not eating a Cinnabon to be fit and healthy so you can live a long life and be happy in a long life and be effective at work and very effective at fucking girls. That's very alpha male 2.0. So that thought is wrong, but I have that thought in my back of my subconscious that I've been working on. Now that thought is not nearly as strong as it used to be. It isn't. It's still there. It's still there, but it's not nearly as strong as it used to be. Also, in my case, This is an example of a combination of my personality and my upbringing. As many of you know, I was brought up in a very, very lower middle class, financially strapped family. Later in life, my dad started making more money, but when I was a little kid, we had very, very, very little money. My dad was a low income guy supporting a family of 7. As a matter of fact, he was the last generation of American men who were able to do that. The average low income man today can't even support himself and needs a roommate. But anyway, we had very little money. And so when we sat down for dinner, we would have a certain amount of food that was divvied out to each kid. And I had this thing when I was a little kid, because I was kind of an anal INTJ little kid, and I always had this thing in my head saying, there isn't enough. There isn't enough food. If my brothers and my sisters eat all this fucking food, I won't get enough food. And I kept thinking that over and over and over and over again throughout my entire childhood. And now, unfortunately, it is wired into my subconscious. So now I have to work on ripping that wiring out. And so occasionally, even to this day, when I'm eating food, especially if it's good food, food that tastes really good, like lasagna or something, this voice in the back of my head says, oh my God, you better eat this all. You better eat all this food because there might not be enough. And matter of fact, you better order more food because there might not be enough, Caleb. And again, it's false. It's a false voice. It's telling me something that isn't true. So those are my 2 psychological problems. And probably I have other psychological issues too, carb addiction and all that other stuff. I'm sure I have other issues too on top of those, but those are the 2 big ones I have. And so when I try to lose weight, I'm wrestling psychologically with these things. And so there's a lot of techniques that I have started to implement from the Noom app and from some other reading I've done on how to arrest and manage and quiet the psychological aspects of my own being that tell me that restricting my calories is bad, and not eating enough food is bad, and not eating the kind of food I want is bad. Not eating a donut is bad. Not eating Taco Bell is bad. I have to work on these things, and I have. So that's it. That's basically the bottom line of how this works. When you see an overweight person in the modern era and in the Western world, that person is an L or an S. And if that person is an L, you can tell that person how to do it. Intermittent fasting, track your calories, do keto with fast, blah, blah, blah. And if that person is motivated enough, and he or she likely will not be, but if that person is motivated enough, that person will take action and he'll lose all the weight in 6 months. He or she will lose all the weight in 6 months on the outside, maybe 7 months, 8 months, if they're really big, and they'll be fine. They'll be okay if they get the motivation, and they usually don't. Type L overweight people are usually overweight for the rest of their lives. If that person is a type S and you tell them about, your weight training routine and, intermittent fasting and, do the zone diet, whatever the bullshit, that person will go, oh, that's a really good idea, and it won't work. You've got to instead tell that person to address their psychology, because that's where the problem is. And if you don't address the psychology, if you're type S, you will not lose the weight that you want to lose. And boy, do I know about this. You'll lose some weight. I've lost a decent amount of weight. And I've gotten a lot better. I'll give you 2 improvements that I've made. Number 1 is I don't binge eat anymore. I used to binge eat on a regular basis. And I would say, oh, once a week I can eat whatever I want. Awesome. And I would eat like 10,000 calories on a Saturday. I would wake up in the morning and go to Burger King. I remember doing this years ago. Go to Burger King and I would order 3 or 4 or 5 biscuits, bacon, egg, and cheese biscuits, and 3 or 4 or 5 breakfast burritos, those little ones from McDonald's or Burger King, and just shovel those down. Then I'd wait a few hours and I'd go to the Mexican restaurant, eat a gigantic nacho, like a full-size nacho that looks like a mountain, and I'd eat the entire thing myself. And then later in the evening, I'd have donuts or a big burger, go to Red Robin or something, get a big greasy burger and have some donuts I would do all this in a day. I don't do that anymore. It's been years since I've done anything like that. And that makes me feel gross now. So that's good. That has helped a lot. Another improvement I made is I don't have an overwhelming craving when I see bad food. So what I used to be like is when I was in the grocery store and I'd walk past the bakery aisle and see all the pastries and donuts, I would like, oh my God, and I would buy a bunch. And either I'd eat some that night or I'd take a few days to eat them all or I'd binge eat them or whatever. I don't have that problem anymore. I've trained my brain where I can walk through a donut shop or walk through a bakery and look at the food and appreciate the food, but not have this overwhelming feeling to order any of the food and to get the food. So I can walk through those areas of the supermarket and not buy any of those things. Which again, if you've never been overweight in your entire life, or you're a type L, that may not sound like a big accomplishment to you because you're already like that. You're like that naturally, but I had to work on that, and that's a big victory for me. So those are 2 improvements. I made a bunch of other little improvements. The speed at which I eat. I do a lot more mindful eating. If this topic is of interest to you, I can do a follow-up podcast on what I do, on the exact techniques that I utilize when I eat. I have a whole eating procedure now that I have to follow. I hate it. It's a big pain in my ass, but I do it because I've got to deal with these psychological problems. So that's it. There are probably some other things I want to do to address this podcast, but I think you got the gist. That's basically the bottom line as to why people in the Western world are overweight. Two very different categories. They're fat for very different reasons. They lose the weight if they do for very different reasons. And certain advice will work for one category of person, will be useless for another category of person. I'm going to repeat this again. If you're giving a bunch of tactical advice to an overweight person who is a type S, you are literally wasting your time. You can give them all the tactical advice they want, and even if they take action on it, which they probably won't, but even if they do, they will lose a little weight and then they'll stop. It will not work. You've got to tell them to address their psychology. And if more people understood that, there'd be a lot less confusion around this topic. It's kind of sad, actually, because I see it almost every day on the internet. A fat person trying to lose weight on a forum or a Facebook group or something, and a whole bunch of guys who have either never been overweight in their entire lives, never really overweight, or former type Ls will just fly in, come out of the woodwork, and give them all this tactical advice. And if that guy's a type S, it ain't gonna work. It's not gonna work. So everyone means well, but they don't understand the distinction between these two types of people. All right, that's it. I've rambled enough about this topic. I will talk to you very soon. Have fun. Bye.